Before we get into today's episode, it's the last day of June, so our last chance to catch up to the Bengals breakdown here at Chat Sports in subscribers for the month and keep our distance from the Ravens rundown. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already, if you want to win the AFC North this year. What's going on, everyone? Welcome on in to the Cleveland Browns Report. Coming up on today's show, we've got some really good, positive updates on Nick Chubb's rehab, and then we've got an update from the Amari Cooper holdout situation as that story continues to take different twists and turns. But let's start things off with the Nick Chubb side of things, because every single summer, we get an awesome video of Nick Chubb benching, squatting 1,000 pounds or whatever. And this summer, that video could not have come soon enough. And we finally got a little taste of what Nick Chubb has been doing so far during the summer months of the offseason. And I want to share it with you guys as it comes from his personal running back coach, Brad Lester, who tweeted out this video.
Move. Hold contact. Good. Good. Left. Right. Right. Left. Good.
After watching those two videos, all I've got to say is, Nick Chubb, I will see you in September. The only thing we were missing from that is just vintage Nick Chubb squatting the weight of the world every single summer. But if we're already in June getting videos of him working out, yeah, I think by September we will see Nick Chubb on the football field. I think we have progressed so far from let's hope Nick Chubb doesn't miss the entire season to let's hope Nick Chubb is back sometime in the middle of 2024 to could Nick Chubb be back in September to could Nick Chubb be back week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys? Like, look at the progress he has made from tearing his MCL, ACL, meniscus, all of those knee injuries September 18th of last year to his final surgery, which is really when the recovery date starts, November 14th, to he's on crutches at the home Steelers game, walking out of the tunnel, to the road Rams game where he's up in the press box or up in the suite with Andrew Berry and other members of the Browns off of crutches, to reports of him running on land, to he's working out, and now we are all circling September 8th as the week 1 home opener against the Dallas Cowboys. And I think there is a decent shot we're going to see Nick Chubb as early as week 1. Now, what does Nick Chubb look like when he makes his return? That's a separate conversation, right? Because it's not going to be, Nick Chubb picks up where he left off and he gets 25 carries a game. I think there's going to be some ramping up that has to be done. And maybe the Browns decide, hey, we'd rather just wait until Nick Chubb can get to a 25 carry a game workload before tossing him out there for just 8 to 10 carries. I think they're going to want to do some ramping up. But you can see that there are a lot of players that have unfortunately suffered major knee injuries, and it took them a while to get back. Like, look at Javonte Williams last year. He suffered a similar-ish knee injury to Nick Chubb in October of 2022, and last year he averaged 3.6 yards a carry. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, recent examples for the Ravens. But then I think back to not as severe, but major knee injuries to AP and Jamal Charles, and this was a while ago. And those guys, like Adrian Peterson, the year after tearing his ACL, like 7 months after tearing his ACL, puts up 2,000 yards, wins the NFL MVP award, averages 6 yards a carry. So no offense to Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards, but what tier of running backs do you think Nick Chubb is closer to? The guys like AP and Jamal Charles who bounce back and put up monster numbers, or some of the other running backs we just looked at? I think he's a lot closer to the APs of the world. And Nick Chubb is just not someone you want to bet against. Like, I remember being somewhat skeptical about just his overall future and what he would look like with the Browns in 2024 back in January and February, where his future with the team was not up in the air, but it wasn't concrete. And here we are now with a new deal done for this upcoming season, a lot of incentives put into it, which I don't think Nick Chubb's camp would agree to if they didn't think he could play much of the season, which means starting things early on. So we'll look at the Browns' schedule here. Week 1, home opener against the Cowboys. I remember when Andrew Berry said to the NFL insiders, we're excited to see Nick Chubb run out of that home tunnel for his season debut. So unless Andrew Berry, a Harvard man, misspoke, home debut or just debut at home, that would be the Cowboys or the Giants. Those are the only two games in the first month of the schedule that would satisfy home and season debut. And so I'm looking at week 1 against the Cowboys. And if you're Dallas, you've got to be absolutely terrified if Nick Chubb comes out and what that will do to this crowd. For first down, Nick Chubb in the backfield, that place is going to be rocking. So if you want to see Chubb suit up and play in week 1, let's send the guy some good vibes. Type 24 in the comment section. I know we do this from time to time, and yeah, it's a bit cheesy and a bit cornball. I'm not going to lie to you guys, but I mean, after watching Nick Chubb, do those workout videos, the guy is busting his ass right now, and maybe he just wants to see a little bit of a confidence booster from the dog pound. So if you're watching, show the guy some love. Type 24 down below in the comment section. Let's switch gears and talk about Amari Cooper for the second half of today's episode, because I saw this photo across social media. It is from an Instagram story of one of Amari Cooper's close friends. I kind of stalked this guy on Instagram. They've been friends for a while. I'm not quite sure what the nature of the friendship is, but this was the Instagram story post from One Way Esteban. I don't really know who that is, other than he's a friend of Amari Cooper's. And he tagged at Cleveland Browns, one of the oldest organizations in the league. Coop, the only back-to-back 1,000-yard receiver in franchise history, record holder at 3 different NFL franchises. Where is the work you from these guys all believe in so much? So when I saw and I read this, the first thing I thought was, is this an episode of Ballers? Like, is this Reggie from Ballers trying to mess with Vernon? If no one else gets that reference, I'm sorry, but this literally seemed like out of a half-ass HBO show like Ballers. Has, in the history of the NFL, a friend ever helped a player get a bigger contract? We see this from time to time, whether it's family or close friends kind of chiming in support of the player. And listen, they want to be a supportive friend. That's cool. When you're talking about the NFL, it gets a much bigger spotlight than if you're trying to be a supportive friend for a smaller career field. But I just cannot remember the last time a GM's like, fuck, One Way Esteban is on our ass. We've got to give Amari Cooper a bigger contract now. I don't think these have ever progressed contract talks whatsoever. But it does give us another excuse to kind of look at this from a different angle, which is, hey, record holder at 3 different NFL franchises. Listen, I am 100% in support of Amari Cooper getting a contract extension. I do think he has earned it, and I think he'll live up to it. There are a lot of times in sports where players earn a contract extension, but then they don't really put up the numbers that they were when they were on a cheaper deal. Now, the latest reports we got were from Brad Stainbrook at the Orange and Brown Report. He said the Browns were willing to give Amari Cooper a raise and nothing more than a 1-year extension onto his deal. Whereas it looks like Cooper and his camp are looking for 2, maybe 3 years added onto his contract. Now, Amari just turned 30 years old on June 17th, so about 2 weeks ago. And I can understand why people look at the number 30 and think, you want to extend him now? Look at all the great wide receivers coming out of the draft. That's a dumb idea. Why would you pay a 30-year-old? You can draft one in March or April next year. It's not as apples to apples as that makes it sound. One, Amari Cooper is a really freaking good wide receiver, and you're not guaranteed to find a better one in the draft. As much as you and I love to think that the draft is the solution to everything, you don't have as high of a hit rate in the draft as you think you do when you just say, we could just draft a guy at that position. Now, what could an extension look like? We've shared these numbers before, but if you're just kind of first tuning in for the Amari Cooper contract saga, these are the top 10 highest paid wide receivers based on average salary. And Amari Cooper, I don't believe, is arguing to become a top 10 highest paid receiver in football. But he's currently at 20 right now. And I could see the Browns being very much okay with him going from 20 to somewhere between 16 and 14, right? You give him an extra $1 to $2 million a season, and you bump him up 5 spots. And players like to continually, push up the wide receiver rankings. All tides raise, all boats, whatever that expression is. So I think that's what Cooper is really trying to accomplish here. Now, you might notice a lot of the guys on the list are on the younger side. T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, right? Terry McLaurin. So what about wide receivers that are 31 years plus? Tyreek Hill is fourth on this list overall in average salary. Devontae Adams is sixth. Cooper Kupp is seventh. Stephon Diggs 15th. Then Mike Evans, Keenan Allen. Now, Amari Cooper just turned 30 years old. So if they were to extend him, you could see where he would roughly fall amongst his peers. So I don't want to hear that you don't pay a 30-plus-year-old wide receiver. Sure you do. Look at Tyreek Hill. Look at Devontae Allen. These guys are all really good wide receivers. I understand that argument fits a lot better for running backs, but don't think it's a simple crossover to wide receivers. Every single player on this list had, except for Cooper Kupp, who was injured last year, had a near career season a year ago. All of them put up monster numbers. So I'm not a believer of you can't pay a 30-year-old wide receiver. Absolutely you can. And I'll say more on why just a second here. Now, I'm in favor of giving Cooper an extension. I think a 2-year, $42 million extension is somewhat in the range where these two sides could agree on. That's an average of $21 million, so that bumps Cooper up 4 spots on that wide receiver ranking list. Maybe Cooper wants to get $22 million a season. An extra $2 million over 2 years really shouldn't make or break the Browns' salary cap plans. But for everyone that's been saying, Petey, Cooper's going to fall off. He just turned 30 years old. Why would you pay a 30-year-old wide receiver when you can just draft one when you get back in round 1 next year? I can't say you're wrong because I have no idea, neither do you, what the round 1 wide receiver draft crop is going to look like next year, whether or not the Browns will be in a spot to draft a premium wide receiver that they want. But what I can tell you is history says wide receivers, they don't fall off a cliff like you think they might. What I did was I looked at every single wide receiver that had multiple 1,000-plus yard receiving seasons. And obviously it's filled with Hall of Famers. And that's not the argument I'm trying to make here. But you can see, just by the way, for reference, how insanely good Jerry Rice is. 14 seasons with over 1,000 receiving yards. The next highest is at 10. Like, he's never going to have that record be broken. Now, where does Amari Cooper fall in? He's tied for 18th with a lot of other players with 7 seasons with over 1,000 yards. So, there are 17 players above Amari Cooper in NFL history with more 1,000-yard single-season receiving yards. Only 2 players on this list we just looked at have 1 season with over 1,000 receiving yards beyond the age of 30. Brandon Marshall and Torry Holt. Only 2 guys on that list we just looked at that didn't have at least 2 seasons of 1,000-plus yards over the age of 30. What does this mean in Michael Scott terms? Like, explain to a 5-year-old. If you're a really consistent wide receiver for your career, which having multiple 1,000-yard seasons is almost the definition of consistent, you don't just fall off a cliff when you get to 30. All those guys, with the exception of Brandon Marshall and Torry Holt, had at least 2 seasons. Some had several more 1,000-plus yard receiving seasons over the age of 30. And the fact that not a single one of them had 0 seasons with over 1,000 yards beyond the age of 30, I think it goes to show if Amari Cooper is in that company, it's a pretty safe bet to make. He's not going to fall off a cliff. He's going to continue to put up the same types of numbers he has put up over the last few seasons. So, in my opinion, the only real question there is to whether or not you should extend Amari Cooper, because I'm not going to entertain the idea of he's going to start sucking, is there enough cap space? Financially, can you get it done? Or do you have other mouths to feed? And ultimately, as good as Amari Cooper has been, they just can't swing for a $21 million wide receiver. That's not a bad argument to make. The salary cap is a myth. It's tough to understand and comprehend, but we can try and make it as simple as possible and as digestible for you guys. So what I have on screen for everyone is the 2025 cap hits. Now, cap hits are not the only way to measure a player's contract and its value and how, whatever you want to call it. But Deshaun Watson next year scheduled to have a $63.9 million cap hit. I 100% expect that to be restructured. I do not see the Browns putting Deshaun Watson on the books for 2 seasons of $63.9 million. Now, other guys that could see those numbers altered. Denzel Ward, I think if they get more good play out of him next year, they'll be happy to restructure his contract. Maybe even probably a little bit too early for another extension, but that'll be coming up. I think Myles Garrett's going to get a contract extension, and when you do that, you can spread out his cap hit. Jack Conklin, I feel like this might be his last year with Cleveland if they get some really good play from DeJuan Jones. Wyatt Teller and Joel Bitonio, I don't see both those guys returning with those cap hits in 2025. Greg Newsome, he'll be on a fully guaranteed 5th-year option. Jedrick Wills, $11.8 million. David Njoku, Dalvin Tomlinson. So not all these players are going to be back next year with these cap hits. So it's not going to be as easy as you might like, but I don't think it's impossible to do. Now, one new wrinkle that may actually impact Amari Cooper and his extension hopes, the recent NFL Sunday Ticket class action lawsuit. I've actually tried to spend a lot of time researching this to understand it, and I have a very loose understanding of what the hell is going on here. But basically, there is a class action lawsuit against the National Football League and CBS, NBC, Fox, all of those major networks that basically ripped off the American consumer by not allowing a la carte, and they inflated the price of Sunday Ticket, and it's antitrust, and I don't really know what all that means. But what I do know is a judge in California ordered for them to pay out $4.6 billion. Now, the NFL is appealing this. There's also some law that makes that tripled, so they could have ended up paying about $15 billion. Why am I telling you guys all this? If the NFL truly does have to pay out somewhere between $5 billion to $15 billion, the owners are going to say, well, we're not going to raise the salary cap as much because that just took a big chunk out of our profits. And the salary cap goes up as revenue comes in. If this takes away from their revenue, well, the Browns have made a lot of bets on the salary cap continuing to rise, and that allows them to backload a lot of these deals and put big cap hits towards the end because the percentage cap hit now compared to 2026 will be a lot smaller for those deals. That's only if the salary cap continues to rise. I think I've got that down. I won't swear by that, but that's my kind of 5th grade elementary understanding of what happened with the NFL Sunday Ticket. Ultimately, which it is being appealed, it's going to get hung up in the courts for probably a long time. Ultimately, though, my prediction is I think Amari Cooper will sign a 1-year contract extension. I don't think they will meet a middle ground on a 2-year deal. The Browns have offered to give him a raise. Cooper's looking for more than just a raise. He wants some assurance for 2025, which is why I could see Amari Cooper getting a 1-year extension, and that probably may not be a win-win for both parties, but it'll be a win for the Browns, and it'll be good for Amari Cooper. So that's kind of my prediction as to what's going to be the resolution of this holdout. All right, before we get on out of here, if you guys want to get your paws on a new Jim Brown jersey, 25% off, chatsports.com/Jim Brown. I put this link in the comments and description of today's video. It's never a bad idea to get some new gear and swag in your life. I went to go visit my cousin for his 21st birthday over the weekend, and my uncle is like a sports memorabilia collector. Went to his man cave. He had every single autograph from any player you could ever imagine. He has some really cool Browns gear in there as well. All right, let's pick a card to wrap up today's show. We've got producer Reed coming in with me on a Sunday to get you guys some nice content to start the end the week, start the week off. So, Reed, which card do you want to go with?
You know, I was thinking about this the whole show. Jack of Spades.
Jack of Spades? All right, I like it. I'm going to go, we're watching the Euros right now, 1-1. I'm going to go with the 2 of clubs, 1 plus 1. No, but you were close. Queen of Spades. Ooh, that's close. Queen of Spades. All right, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will sign off and see everyone later.